parenting kids. Tom, I know you've said in the past the best way to parent kids is to get your own head on straight first and foremost. So while that's true, I'd like to dig a little deeper into this. I'm currently a parent of two young kids and do my best to keep my own head on straight, but as we know, that is a lifetime's work. So one particular aspect of parenting I find challenging is in regards to controlling their decision space or free will. Notably, you generally say kids are one of the few exceptions where exercising control over someone else's free will can be the right thing to do. So I'm generally okay with letting others live and let live, but this gets tricky with children. Extreme examples are easy, such as not letting them play on a busy street because of the danger involved. But other situations get more complex, specifically with how you go about limiting their free will, the extent, duration, etc. The situation is also highly dependent on the age or maturity of the children, and they change over time. So I read a few parenting books early on, but quickly moved on from them and just generally go with my intuition on what's best. So here's one example. My two young children are at the age where they get into conflicts or fights quite frequently. It could be both. It could be about both of them wanting the same thing at the same time, arguing about who is right about some topic or whatever. I've seen this play out countless times, so I can tell early on when it is happening. I have the choice to put a stop to it early on before it escalates, or let it play out and see if they can resolve the issue themselves. If I decide to step in, how do I go about doing that? If things have escalated a bit too far, a kind, gentle, and soft voice is likely to be ignored due to them focusing on each other too intensely. So I can raise my voice or decide to intervene physically in some way. There's a huge spectrum of potential, intensity and choices in my response. I also have to sort out who to focus on first or try to balance both of them in some way. The range of possibilities here is immense. It's very dynamic. There's downstream ripple effects or consequences, and it rarely ever feels like I get it quite right. So any more instant insight into how to raise children here is, greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. Often, instead of making a kind of a verbal interceding with the squabble, verbally, that usually isn't very helpful. Because if you holler at them both, children, be quiet, children, stop fighting, that's generally not too effective, or maybe only effective for 10 or 15 seconds, or as soon as you turn your back and walk into another room. It's better if you intervene not verbally, but physically. If you go over and sit down with them, or get right into their space, sit down, not necessarily have to be right between them, but sit down right with them so they're both within arm's reach. Ask them what it's all about. And of course, they'll tell you very gladly. You do one at a time, make them wait while the other one talks, and make that one wait when they talk. And then don't resolve it for them or just tell them that's wrong behavior and send them off to try to deal with that. But try to give them a little coaching about dealing with things that you don't like, dealing with other people with attitudes that conflict with yours. So if you can sit down with them, and it'll probably take 10 minutes of your time, but just talk to them about, well, okay, Susie thinks this, George thinks that. And let's say, that you have a best friend and they say something that you disagree with. What would you do then? Well, their act would be different then because, a little brother or a little sister's totally different than a best friend. So you could get them to think about that, and then they'll realize that they're more snippety or more, forceful when it's their sibling, because siblings fight a lot. So fighting is just kind of what they do. So they realize that. And then you can say, well, when you feel like that, you should try to understand what the other person, where they're coming from, why they feel that way. And most of the time, you might even convince them that that person feeling that way isn't really such a bad thing. It's kind of their problem. Why do you want to make it your problem? You know, that kind of thing. Just give them some coaching on how to deal with problem people, because they both believe that their sibling is a problem person, you know, quite often. And that's probably just natural enough. They compete for a lot of things. They compete for attention. They compete for whatever. They compete for who gets the crayons next. You know, they want the same thing, like you say, at the same time. So if you could give them some lessons about that, when you become negative with another person, that immediately makes that other person more negative with you. And you need to start any kind of argument or things where you're not getting along with somebody. You need to think, is there some way that I can act, something I can say or do that makes it a win-win for everybody? You know, that we can both deal with it. And it might be, well, like, well, you have the crayons now, and I'll get them after you're done. Or you color one picture, and after you're done, I'll color the next, because they both want the crayons. You know, there's always ways to make it a win-win so that both of them can get at least part of what they want. And then if they learn the idea, you know, the old Rolling Stone song, you know, you don't always get what you want, but if you try, sometimes, you know, you get what you need. Well, that would be a big lesson. You don't always get what you want. You have to be considerate of others and not just go for what I want, what I need, but you have to be aware that other people exist and also have needs. And then you need to work with that. So if you could, now, you know, that's a lot. And I'm telling you more on an adult level. You'll have to reduce that down to, you know, however old your children are. And I don't mean that you sit down and give them a lecture, because that won't work at all. Both of their eyeballs will roll up in their head, and they'll just think, you know, oh no, you know, fighting was a whole lot more fun than listening to dad lecture us. So, uh, not a lecture, but just 5 minutes, you know, just ask them some questions and give them some hints how to do that. And they will ignore it. Probably the first 10 times you do that, they will just ignore it. But if you keep doing it and keep showing them ways that they could have reacted or acted, and they wouldn't have this problem now, because now both of them had to stand in a corner for 5 minutes, you know, whereas, you know, if they settled it some other way, nobody would have to stand in a corner for 5 minutes. Neither what they wanted, but they'd get some of what they wanted and avoid the wrath of dad, or the punishment that comes, or having to listen to him lecture. You know, whatever the downside is of bad behavior, they could avoid that. And there has to be a downside to bad behavior, you know, so otherwise you don't have much to encourage them to have good behavior. So there needs to be a downside to bad behavior. So I'd say that no lectures, just a few hints, a few, it's not counseling, it's more coaching. And try to make it not about their sibling, but how to get along with other kids at school, how to get along with the other kids, you know, neighbors and so on, because they have all the same things there. They fight with those kids too. Kids get in arguments with each other all the time, you know, because they're very self-centered. It's all about them. They want their way. And it's the fighting with other kids is an everyday thing. So instead of making it about sibling to sibling, make it about, you know, people at school that they don't like or don't get along with, and how they could better deal with that. So that'll teach them some things. Like I say, it may be, you may go through that 10 times and think you're getting nowhere because you don't see any progress, but it does sink in. It just sinks in slowly. Like everything else, repetition is a key. You get it into your being level, it's repetition. And by the time it's their 50th or 100th time they hear that, it starts to ring a bell, and they start to see the logic in it and the value of it. So it's just persistence. Be gentle, keep it light, no lectures, but be persistent with it.
Yeah, it's the persistence is a good point because it's hard when because you're as a parent, you're kind of trying to figure out things as you go, and you're, let's say doing this and you do it 10 times and they still don't get it. And it's like, well, is what I'm doing the right approach, or do I need to do it a different way, or make the punishment harder, or whatever, right? Like there's always that kind of second
Well,
guessing. Yeah.
trial and error, try different things. Different kids respond to different things in different ages, so you just trial and error. But it doesn't help if you just holler at them, be quiet, children. Dad's trying to do his homework, be quiet. If you're gonna fight, go downstairs and fight, or go to your rooms. If you do those kinds of things, generally they don't learn much. They fought, they got in trouble, they had some punishment, but they didn't learn anything. The idea is to give them some ideas of how to do it differently. So even though they'll reject those ideas initially, they won't reject them always. As they get a little older, they'll see the wisdom in what you're telling them. And they'll use it to their advantage when that, annoying person at school starts giving them a hard time. They'll be able to have tools for handling that. So those would be my suggestions.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you very much.